First, I'd like to welcome everyone to this joint meeting of the Washtenaw County Democratic Party and the Ann Arbor Democratic Party. I'm Eli Nathans. I'll be the moderator. I want to point out that this meeting is being recorded, and we post the recordings on the WCDP website, usually a week or so after the meeting. I want to begin with the land acknowledgement. Washtenaw County occupies the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Ojibwa, and Potawatomi. The Washtenaw County Democratic Party recognizes historic Indigenous communities in Michigan and those that were forcibly removed from their homelands. Washtenaw County occupies land ceded in the 1807 Treaty of Detroit. In offering this land acknowledgement, we recognize Indigenous history and experiences. I'd now like to ask Theresa Reid if she wants to say a few words. Theresa is the incoming WCDP chair. Welcome.
Hi, thanks everybody. Thank you, Eli, and hi everybody. I really appreciate your confidence in making me the WCDP chair. I'm thrilled to take the role on from Chris Savage. I have a bunch of things to say, and I'm going to do it like at double speed the way I'm listening to podcasts lately because there's so much going on. This is, of course, the first meeting of the 2024 election cycle, and we're welcoming the co-sponsorship of the Ann Arbor Dems. What I wanted to say was this is kind of the best of times and the worst of times at the same time. Yesterday, second anniversary of the worst insurrection in U.S. history since the Civil War. Our Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, received the Presidential Citizens Medal from our President, Joe Biden, along with 14 other heroes who protected our democracy. So that's very cool. Also, best for the first time in 130 years, thanks to the anti-gerrymandering activism many of us started in 2017. Dems control all three branches of Michigan's government. Our friend Senator Jeff Erwin, is going to bring us up to speed on how our lawmakers are working in Lansing to organize themselves to serve us best. Nationally, as we all know, President Biden's policies have resulted in the lowest unemployment in 50 years. Mantra has been growing the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, and it's working. So that's very heartening. It's wonderful. Our friends from organized labor are here today to educate us about their policy aims in Lansing and nationally, and to see how we can partner together. And I want to say thanks to Adam Zemke for getting this partnership rolling again between organized labor and the Washtenaw County Dems. And now transitioning to the worst of times. As we know, the 2024 election cycle started on November 9th. Now with Senator Stabenow retiring, the stakes got a lot higher in Michigan. We're engaging as a party in a process of strategic planning this month. It's a rigorous process. We're determined to organize ourselves even more effectively for 2024. You are all critical to that success, and we'll keep you posted and engaged throughout the process. A hard downturn. Debbie Dingell, our U.S. representative, is here to tell us about the shameful and dangerous fracas in the House, which elected Kevin McCarthy Speaker on the 15th round of voting late last night. It might have been early this morning, Debbie can tell us. So the insurrection continues by other means. And of course, homelessness is a crisis, even here in Washtenaw County, which is so wealthy. I would note that 5% of the military budget, which is approaching $1 trillion a year, 5% of that, which would be $50 billion, could eliminate homelessness and hunger in this country. If we collected half of the estimated, if we collected the estimated $500 billion tax dollars that go uncollected from wealthy individuals in this country, we could basically do anything we want for the people. So there's money. We just aren't using it the way Democrats think we should, and we need to take that power. So thanks to Kathy Wyatt and her colleagues, including Judge Erane Washington, for being here to inform us about homelessness here in Washtenaw County. And thanks, as always, to Program Committee co-chairs Eli Nathans and Loretta Codrington for putting together an incredible program for all of us. And that's it. I turn it over to you, Eli or Debbie.
Thank you so much, Theresa. Actually, I see that Jessica Kelly is here. So Jessica, if you want to take 30 seconds just to say a word, since you're co-sponsoring this, you may unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Congresswoman Dingell.
I will say good morning. I'm Jessica Kelly, chair of the Ann Arbor Dems. I want to congratulate Theresa on her incoming officer position and thank the Washtenaw County Dems for having our annual unity meeting. It's something we always look forward to. So thank you for having us today on your date. I know most years the 1st in January is our date. So thanks for being a great host, and thank you for your comments today, Theresa. Thank you so much, Jessica. We really appreciate the willingness of the Ann Arbor Dems repeatedly to share their time slot with us in January. Congresswoman Dingell, I understand there's been things going on in Washington these days.
I have not yet been to bed. It was the hours of the morning when we got sworn in. And I think it was a week that did not make our country look good. Democrats came in united, ready to go to work on every single one of the votes. All 212 Democrats were present, voted for Hakeem, and we were united. You saw chaos on the other side. Literally at the end last night, there were almost fistfights on the floor. And it's concerning. I mean, I want to say that I don't think it makes our country look good. We put our country at risk because the fact of the matter is, while the House was not sworn in, there were a lot of things. They tried to tell us that we couldn't do constituent services. And I was one of the people that challenged that and said, I would take that to any judge. And if someone wants to tell me I'm doing something wrong, go ahead, take me to court. But they were not allowed to get, Intelligence Committee was not allowed to get intelligence briefings. There was not a, it was a very, so we were sworn in around 2:30, 3 o'clock this morning, and we are an official Congress. I have not been to bed yet. We did not do the rules package last night, so we still do not have rules for the House. The initial rules package has a lot of things that are very disturbing, repealing the 89,000 with the Fox talking points of the IRS agents, which are not going after everyday people, but trying to, after the Trump tax cuts, trying to get billionaires and corporations to pay their fair share. They're doing another, doing a lot of repeals of bills. I think the thing that scares me the most, we know that they're going to try to do oversight hearings, which are going to try to embarrass this president. And I think the thing that we got to worry the most about that will affect our national security and our economy is when we have to raise the debt ceiling. So we're going to have a lot to talk about. I'm going to keep you all informed. I am going to say to you point blank, I am prepared to work across the aisle on issues that I care about. And those issues are going to stay the same. PFAS is one. We need long-term care, healthcare issues, domestic violence, reducing the cost. There's a new Republican that came, and I was talking to the chair of my committee. Remember, we've got Republican chairs now, and we were talking about how to deal with pharmacy benefit managers who increase costs. So I'm going to try to be optimistic that maybe there are issues that we all care about, that we can find common ground. And I remember we still have a Democratic Senate, and we have a White House that is Democratic. And I think for the American people, we need to try to get some bills done, but I'm not going to kid myself. I think it's going to be a wild 2 years. I want to do some other housekeeping issues as we, I was stunned that Debbie Stabenow announced that she was not running. She had told me a month ago that she was, as well as the governor and others. Because this is my district, I have told people I will look at it. My real goal is to make sure that we have the strongest candidate in that seat and we do not lose that seat. And anybody who thinks that this is a blue state needs to understand, well, Ann Arbor, not even Washtenaw, all of Washtenaw County is in the 6th district now. I'm lucky to have Ann Arbor and Ypsi, and they are solid Dem areas. Western Washtenaw, for those of you who have worked over there, and several of you are representing them, it is not solid blue. It is purple and red. And and so have some of the state legislators experienced it in the doors. This state is a competitive state, and the Republicans are making it their #1 state. So I'm more focused on getting the research done, who can win, et cetera. So that is my first and foremost goal. So, and the environmentalists want to make sure we don't send another Joe Manchin to the Senate, and progressives. So I've had many conversations. So while I've agreed not to say no, I'm more focused on finding the strongest candidate than anything. So I want to say that to you, and that is really going to matter. Protecting the seats that we won in this next year. It's going to be a presidential election year. I'm very proud of the work that we've done. It now has Michigan, the president recommending the Michigan be in the early states. We have a DNC meeting the first week in February that we have to make sure that that gets approved. While Michigan is doing what it needs to do, a couple of the other states are causing problems. And this is still very much these next 4 weeks. It's going to be another priority for me to get the DNC to approve this. And this is far from being a done deal, though I pray, and we may end up moving up another week because I think it's going to be very difficult, Georgia. So there's a lot of things moving, but we will be an early state, which means we will be a state where we really need to be prepared to talk about the issues and get these candidates in. And to that end, no details. I will keep everybody informed, but the vice president will be in Michigan, will be in Ann Arbor on Thursday. So I don't know how it's going to get set up or what it is, but it's not public. So I'm asking you not to share that publicly, but I think you will see more of this in the next 2 years. And we need to be prepared and to talk about those issues. We need to talk about affordable housing. We need to make sure we're getting candidates talking about the issues that really impact people every single day. The 6th district the convention, state convention is not the first weekend in February because that's DNC, it's the next weekend. We will have a 6th district convention next Saturday, the 14th. It will be done by Zoom, and that will be to simply pick the 3 rule. I'm so great, you guys. I haven't been to bed, but it's somebody can help me. It's the rules committee, the resolutions committee, and the credentials committee. I think, is that right? To pick representatives for that. We have asked anybody interested in serving on State Central to please indicate their interest. That will be done at the state convention. And quite frankly, Washtenaw County has done such a fabulous job of organizing that I've talked to the club presidents, had a meeting with them. We really want to restructure the 6th district, have a strong executive committee, every club have presentation on it, but then follow the model of Washtenaw to have precinct delegate organizers, program organizers, be really accessible. We want to get precinct delegates in every single, Washtenaw done a good job, and we want to copy that for the 6th district as well. And I would say to people in Washtenaw, as you look at the 6th district, we kind of have 3 cohorts. We have Washtenaw, which, as again, I remind everybody, is complicated. We're all used to meeting, but Western Washtenaw is not as strong as many of the people that are involved here, which even judges who have run can tell, people who've worked on the other side. We have the downrivers, which are, we got to make sure we reelect Jamie Churches, and their 2 state legislative seats we want to try to pick up. We lost one, and there's one we could have picked up that we've got to focus on there. In Washtenaw, we want to make sure we keep who we got elected. And then we have the Plymouth, Canton, Northville, and townships, and Novi, which has, they're really 3 different cohorts. So as a 6th district, we want to help everybody. So that's what we're going to be focused on. There will be a 6th district meeting at the convention. I'm trying to get the timeline from the state party. I will spare you what I maybe think a little of the state party stuff, but I think we have to make sure that they are more organized and communicating more and listening to us more, and leave it at that and behave. So it's going to be a presidential election year. We're going to have a Senate race nobody thought was going to be open. And we're going to have to fight to keep congressional seats and state rep seats. So you know what, guys, I haven't been to bed, and I think there could be a lot of nights like that for the next 2 years. So I'm grateful for your friendship. Happy New Year, and glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingell. I'll try to fit in one question. So from the attendees.
And they don't have to ask any.
Right. So I realize this is, you're probably going on fumes, so to speak. Okay, going once, going twice. All right. Congresswoman Dingell shows up every meeting. There'll be another chance to ask a question. Thank you so much for fitting us in.
Thanks, Eli.
Senator Jeff Irwin.
Thank you so much, Eli. Good morning, Washtenaw Democrats. Thank you as well to Congresswoman Dingell for dealing with such a challenging situation up there in DC and helping make sure that Dems deliver on a federal level. In contrast, things are very different in Lansing, and we hope that things stay very different in Lansing and that we can show a contrast with the dysfunctionality in DC by delivering in Lansing. And there are tons of opportunities. This is the first time in 40 years that Dems have had full control of the Michigan legislature, but we have a short window to be bold and deliver. I'm going to try to move fast and cover as much territory as I can, because I think you can all probably imagine how excited I am to work on this broad range of issues. But first I wanted to start by saying, thank you to all of you for all the work you've done. It's because of the work you've done, it's because of the hard work of the candidates that we're in this position. And I'm just really proud to be able to serve with Sue Schenck in the Michigan Senate. That's because of the work that Washtenaw Dems and so many others did. I'm really proud also to be serving with a growing Washtenaw delegation in the House. And really, many of you may have heard me say that the majority in the House is going to flow through Washtenaw, and is because of successes here, because of successes that many people here on this call delivered and contributed to, that we're looking at a House majority as well. And I'm really proud to be serving with returning Representative Felicia Brayback, as well as a host of great folks from Washtenaw, including Representative Morgan, Representative Reinigans, Representative Jimmy Wilson Jr., Representative Reggie Miller, and Representative Jennifer Conlin. Washtenaw County really delivered and made a huge difference for the state. There is still one part of Washtenaw County. There are now 7 districts in the House that touch Washtenaw County. And so there's now only one of those districts in the House of Reps that's represented by a Republican, and that's a district we can win. So, I think that we should be focused on that, as well as the other races that Congresswoman Dingell was mentioning just a moment ago. Having said that, I'm most excited to talk to you about policy, because I think that our ability to deliver and to take care of those kitchen table issues that everyone's talking about are going to be what determines whether or not Dems are going to stay in power. It's also going to be what determines, I think, whether those of us who are a part of this party are excited and satisfied with the direction of the party. So, look, you've probably been paying attention to the news and know that there are things that Governor Whitmer and Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks and House Speaker Joe Tate have already, publicly said are likely to be top of mind and happening in Lansing and on the agenda. And so you've probably heard us, what I think are really exciting things about that they've said about gun safety laws, things like universal background check, red flag laws to take guns out of the hands of people who have shown that they're dangerous. Safe storage laws to make sure that kids have less access to guns and that they're stored more successfully. You've heard talk about the earned income tax credit, tax policy that would support low-income workers. You've probably heard as well as about repealing the retirement tax and a number of important labor issues. Right to work has been top of mind for our leaders as they've talked to the media. Things like paid time off, and of course, issues like repealing the 1931 law that still is on the books in Michigan, criminalizing abortion. When the voters spoke, that was the most important thing. But now the legislature has an opportunity to speak as well and wipe that law off of our books. I've also heard, our leaders talk about amending Elliott Larson and making sure that Michigan is a place that respects the civil rights of LGBTQ people. So those are all things that our incoming leaders have talked about, and I think are a huge issue for Democrats. And I'm really pleased that they've talked about that. And there are also a number of opportunities in the budget because Dems have delivered at the federal level, because of the good work of people like Congresswoman Dingell and others, because of the Biden bucks that have come into Michigan's budget and haven't all been spent by the previous Republican legislatures. There are dollars available to help with the important issues that our communities are struggling with. Right here in Washtenaw County, we have an affordable housing crisis. That's an issue all over the state, and I expect to see Democrats deliver a lot more resources towards meeting those needs. Investments in our mental health system, human services changes to do a better job of taking care of our seniors and the people who work to serve them. Things like rolling back some of the cruel anti-poverty laws or welfare laws that the Republicans have passed over the years. There are a number of other critical issues that are near and dear to my heart and that are probably important to a lot of you that I think we also need to push to make sure that they're on the agenda. Things like bail reform, other criminal justice reforms, things like polluter pay and making sure that Michigan is a leader in addressing the climate crisis with clean energy. Things like changes to our literacy laws to make sure that we're addressing kids who are struggling with characteristics of dyslexia. So there's just a huge wide range of issues, infrastructure, so many that I don't have time to talk about all of them. And there's a very short window. So what do we do? What I think that we need to do as Democrats, and what I would encourage all of you to do as my friends, is to realize just how short of a window we have and to communicate with your elected officials about what it is you want, what it is that is a priority for you, because we all know that Republicans fall in line, but Dems need to fall in love. And so I'm just asking you to communicate with me, communicate with your other elected officials about what it is that you think is most important to you, and what do you think it is that is going to motivate voters? Because like you, I've been out there on the doors a lot in this last cycle, and I've talked to a lot of voters, and I know that voters need motivation. And you also know, because you're the ones who make this party successful, that when you're out there on the doors and you're talking to voters, we want the tools to engage new voters. We want the tools to inspire voters, and it's easier to inspire those voters when Dems deliver. So, please get active. Please know that now is the time to weigh in and let us know what's most important to you. Because we have a very short window of time again to get these things done. And I'm very, very excited about it. I hope you're excited about the opportunity we have to deliver in Lansing. And if we do deliver, that's going to be the thing that gives us the greatest chance to do well next election cycle, continue to have an opportunity to serve the people of Michigan, continue to have the opportunity to make the discussion in Michigan a serious discussion about our schools, our environment, and our future here in the state of Michigan. So thank you so much for giving those of us who are elected in the state legislature an opportunity to have a whole different conversation about how we treat people and how we build community here in the state of Michigan.
Thank you so much, Senator Irwin. We have time for one question, if it's quick. So if anyone who's an attendee would care to raise their hand. Once again, Senator Irwin also appears at these meetings very regularly, for which we thank him. And I see there is one question. Just a second. See, that is Janet Cannon. I'm going to unmute you. I believe you should be unmuted now, Janet.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Jeff. Thanks so much for all you're doing. My quick question is just about that lingering terrible injustice of the auto insurance and the long-term care for accident survivors. Do you think that will be on the docket very soon?
Yeah, I think it definitely will. And I left out a lot of issues, a lot of access to justice issues, a number of things. But yes, I do think that fixing auto no fault will be on the agenda. I do think, though, that that's going to be a very sticky one because, just speaking for myself, when that came forward initially, one of the priorities that I had in fixing that was ending redlining. Here in the state of Michigan, we have, very segregated communities. And as a result, we have auto insurance rates that are that reflect that segregation in a way that should make us all very uncomfortable. And so, there are those of us who are going to try to, talk about fixing those other issues, the other issues that give insurance companies too much power over rate setting and things like that. So yes, I think that that's going to be on the table. There's a lot of motivation to fix one of the problems that was created by the reforms of 4 years ago, but I think it's going to be made more complicated by the fact that that's the only problem, and that a lot of the people who a lot of Democrats supported that reform. And so it'll be interesting to see exactly what approach they take to rolling it back and fixing it. But there's a lot to be fixed for motorcyclists, for pedestrians. And then there's just the general issue of the folks who were already injured and had the rug pulled out from underneath them with respect to their rehabilitative care.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to have to move on to the next set of panels. Jeff, thanks for appearing. The housing crisis in Washtenaw County. And I want to thank Kathy Wyatt for putting this part of our program together. I should say my understanding is in March, the majority of the program is going to be devoted to this issue, but it's so pressing that we wanted to include it now, even though it meant squeezing the whole program. And I'd like to ask Judge Erane Washington to speak first. She's in Tennessee now, and she's managed to create time for us, for which I'm very grateful. Judge Washington is the Chief Judge of the 14B District Court. Judge Washington.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I actually didn't know I was going to be going first, but I'm happy to do that. So first of all, I want to thank you for having me here today. And it's always a pleasure to see Congresswoman Dingell and see some of my friends here in the Washtenaw County Democratic Party. And so Kathy and I have been talking a while about this, the issue that is going on. And I know that as Dems, we are all very aware of the housing crisis. And as a judge, you know, first of all, the other thing I want to say is thank you for electing me to be the judge. And it is my honor to serve in that capacity. But it's a very difficult time as well to serve in that capacity. And so I was talking to Kathy about this issue, and we decided that one of the things I could do is share some of my experiences. I want to just put that in the context of, you know, as a judge, I can't talk about individual cases, especially if they're ongoing, but I can give you a broader idea of the things that are affecting our system here in Washtenaw County. I think in order to do that, though, I need to contextualize it just a little bit to take us back to where we were, to bring us to where we are now, and what I see as what things are going to look like in the future. So we were in what I call the Sarah era. You know, after the pandemic happened, we then had the Sarah era. For those of you that are not familiar with Sarah, it was a program that allowed for the federal government through the state to pass through funds to help tenants who were having a very difficult time paying their rent. And during that particular time, in addition to that scale, which is the state court administrative offices had put into place a order that allowed for us as judges to stay the process, meaning that no one would get evicted until at least SARA applications and SARA applicants had been reviewed and then determined whether or not they could actually go into that program and give funding. And funding could range anywhere from, you know, 1 month's rent up to about 15 months of rent. That process, as many of you may know, helped out a lot of people. It allowed for me and the other judges who are part of the landlord-tenant process here in Washtenaw County, which is myself, Judge Simpson, Judge Valvo, to create a win-win situation in essence. We had a committee of people, and we are still doing that met once a month, every Wednesday, so to talk about what that SARA process was looking like and how it was helping people. So we were avoiding getting a judgment on people's records. For those of you that don't know, once you get a judgment on your record, it is extremely difficult for you to actually get another apartment. And then we were also, in essence, if you avoid the judgment, then you also avoid the pending eviction. So people were getting their rents paid, and we were able to stay off that process of evictions. Now, that was the benefit of having SARA. That particular benefit ended in December. But we started to see issues even before that happened because people could not afford the rates of rent in terms of where they were. Rents in this county have grown astronomically, creating our affordable housing crisis. So there, at the end of December, a couple of things happened that made us start to have more and more evictions. One, the SARA part was ending, and two, because it was ending, there were some people who were in the system who had been waiting to see what was going to happen. And sometimes, because the process was slow, we were staying off the evictions for maybe 3 to 5 months. So what happens when you have that situation is if an individual comes up to the end of the process and then they're determined to not to be able to get the monies, you have tenants who are 3 to 5 months behind in their rent. So people who are $5,000 to $6,000 behind in their rent obviously are not going to be able to pay that money, and as a result, they end up with judgments. So SCIO at the end of the SARA program created another administrative order. And I'm talking about this very vaguely because I know I have a limited amount of time. That new administrative order says this. Whereas I just said we used to have 5 or 6 months to try to get this done, and we tried to do it faster, obviously, but it just depends on whether Hawk could process it in that time frame. Now, what we have is a process whereby you come before, in my court, and in some courts you just come to the judge twice, but in my court I have the magistrate. So you come before Magistrate Nelson for the first hearing, and that's week 1. And then in week 2, you come before me. At that point, during week 2, the landlord can come into the court, and at that point, they can ask me to give them a judgment. And the court rules and everything say pretty much at that point, that's when they're entitled to their judgment. Judges in this particular county have been trying to stave off the judgments as much as possible by giving people additional time and sort of pushing the envelope a little bit on that by adjourning cases out. And people come to court with this misconception. By people, I mean the tenants come to the court with this misconception, and maybe some of you have it too, that judges can give people payment plans to try to, give them an opportunity to do that. I try to inform, and I'm sure all the other judges do too, that in order to get a payment plan, you got to go through the landlord to actually do that. So the landlords in some cases just aren't willing to do that anymore. They've worked hard during the midst of the regular program, and they aren't willing to do it. So we have some additional programs that are supposed to help. For instance, the State Emergency Relief Act, and also Hawk is available. But those programs, in order to get that type of benefit, they're out now approximately, if the earliest would be the SER, which I would say you're about a month out. Sometimes we can get them to wait until then, but a lot of people don't qualify for that because the standards for the income is so low that a lot of people have incomes that's higher than that. So then the next available benefit for them is usually through Hawk, and Hawk appointments at this time are not until, let's say, for instance, you come to me in January, if they're not until March, which is where they are now, and I've heard someone say they're not until April, then at that point in time, I can't make the landlord wait until that time. So judges have this unique position of having to say to the tenant, I can't wait until that time period. So in essence, they're going to get a judgment against you. If a judgment is obtained against the individual, then they have 10 days to come up with whatever the back pay is, the back rent is for that particular unit. And a lot of times they are just unable to do so. I think the thing that was most moving for Kathy was, and I can't talk about individual cases, so I say, hypothetically, someone comes before me and they have a situation where they have been in the hospital for about, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks or a month because of some traumatic situation. And they, at that point in time, cannot afford to pay their rent. I'm with tears, but you can't see them because I'm a judge and you can't actually watch me cry in court. But literally from the side of my face, tears are running down as people cannot afford to pay their rent and they're being placed out into the streets. And we're at a stage now where folks are actually asking from various communities that I remove people from public places to place them into, just move them to, I don't know how you move someone from the outside to the outside when they don't have a place to go and they are in a public place and then they have to go to a new place. But that's where we are with this housing crisis. It is going to get worse. When I first came back to court, I was off for vacation from December, and I'll be very brief. I know I'm ending my time here. I was off from vacation from December the 21st until January the 3rd. When I returned, I had 26 evictions that I needed to sign for that day. That's 26 families that are going to be out on the streets with no place to go. The next day, I had 8 families. This crisis is terrible and it's only going to get worse. We're just beginning to see how the effects of it in this community. And I've been working with Kathy to try to come up with what we see as a task force to try to tackle it from a systemic point. And I'm hopeful that anybody that has, and that's why I haven't met Mr. Kelly before, but I'm really glad that he's here to talk about this too. But I'm hopeful that we can try to do something unique and try to fix this for the families in this community. I know that PATH is working on it and a whole lot of agencies are working on it, but it is absolutely terrible. So thank you for having me. I'm sorry that I have bad news, but I do want to bring it to everyone's attention about where we are right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for fitting us in. Appreciate that. Dan Kelly, he is the director of the Shelter Association of Washtenaw County, aka the Delonis Center. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Judge Washington, for sharing that. And thank you, everyone, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the party about this critical topic. I'm going to say in advance, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of good news like Judge Washington was sharing. There is a housing crisis in our community. I'm sure we've all seen the skyrocketing housing costs over the last few years. We're seeing prices now sometimes over $1,000 a month for a 1-bedroom, which, that's often the cost of many people's monthly mortgage just a few years ago. And I'm here to share how that's affecting some of our most vulnerable neighbors in Washtenaw County. The housing crisis that we've been going through is with evictions and with skyrocketing cost is leading to increased homelessness. We've seen over 350 people on our by name list of homeless individuals and families currently, and that's up from 265 just in June of this year. So a very significant increase. We're also seeing an increased overnight shelter census every night at the Delonis Center. It's up almost 30% from last winter. I just checked last night. I called this morning and we had over 150 people staying at the Delonis Center, our rotating shelter, and our recuperative care offsite locations just last night. And now we also have over 50 families at this moment experiencing homelessness right now in our community, and there's very few shelter beds to support them. Many sleeping in cars or in other unsafe situations, unfortunately. And the homeless crisis, it disproportionately affects people of color. In Washtenaw County, approximately 60% of those experiencing homelessness identify as Black or African American versus approximately 12% of the county. And then along with these increases in the number of people experiencing homelessness on a given night, we're also seeing increased acuity of our guests. The mental and physical health needs have increased dramatically over the last couple of years. I've seen this since I started in 2017. We've seen our percentage of guests with a disability that's gone from less than 50% to almost 80% now. We're also seeing the catastrophic effects of the opioid epidemic firsthand. It's a pretty stark number, but we've seen a 300% increase in overdoses in the last 5 years. In fact, just the other day, I'm walking out of the center and I walk right into a person who's overdosing in that moment and have to jump in and administer CPR. Obviously, an incredibly challenging situation for that person going through so much, the crisis of homelessness, the crisis of their addiction, mental health, and everything else that's going on. And then also the guests that are present and seeing that, because there's so many people in our building every day, and the staff, quite honestly, our staff do an incredible job responding to these things, but it's been really, really challenging. I am happy to report, though, in that situation, that guest is doing okay. He's getting treatment, getting help from organizations like Community Mental Health and the shelter to try to help him get back on his feet. So, and our homeless services system is not equipped to handle these increases effectively. What we're seeing is longer shelter stays. We're seeing length of time to housing, it's gone up over 30% over the last 5 years for families and those that are chronically homeless. And that's leading to increased waits for beds for families and individuals. At the Delonis Center, just before the winter started, we saw our triage list, which is our wait list, I guess, but it's based on need. It's unfortunate we even have to have one of those in the first place, and just awful, but we saw that number balloon to over 100 people, and that's the highest I've ever seen it. This is meaning that outside of the winter months, when we increase capacity to ensure everyone has access to a shelter bed immediately, that people sometimes are having to wait 2 to 3 months for a shelter bed. Of course, though, we all know what the answer is, and that's housing. Housing ends homelessness. Evidence-based housing models, housing first models exist, such as supportive housing, which does not require people experiencing homelessness to address all the issues that are going on, including behavioral health or anything else, or to graduate through a series of service programs before they can access housing, because it brings housing with those critical supports in place. Places like Miller Manor, like Hickory Way from Avalon. We also all know that we need to drastically increase the supply of affordable housing in our community. Permanent housing programs are the key, to use a word there, to ending homelessness. When currently only 1 in 4 low-income households eligible for some type of low-income rental assistance or housing ever receives it. So really want to speak to everyone about envisioning a community where we have housing for all, where we're investing as a community in these proven solutions that exist in permanent housing with related supportive services when needed, that help people not only obtain but maintain that housing and grow that supply of affordable housing. Really more initiatives and efforts. There's so many things going on already, but we just need to supercharge that. Things like what's going on at the city of Ann Arbor, developing affordable housing, the millage, on which the city's now working to utilize city-owned properties, working with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission and Avalon. And then we've seen over time, if you look back a number of years, the positive effects of strong resource investment in ending homelessness, in issues like national initiatives that Congresswoman Dingell has been a champion for, specifically ending veteran homelessness. Because of the strong investment in veteran homelessness and ending it over the last 10 years or so, we've seen a 47% decrease. So there's a graph somewhere, I was thinking about showing it, but you can find it easily online. You can show the veteran investment and supports go up and the number go down in homelessness, almost 1-to-1. So really, a calling to action for the community to come together, to support, to advocate, to do outreach, and take more action on this looming crisis that we're going through, honestly, right now in this very moment. But thank you for the opportunity. I wish I had better news, but I think there are some answers for us to work towards together to end this crisis.
Thank you so much. I see that I've managed to turn my video off again. I'd like to ask you if any of the attendees have questions, if you take a minute or two to answer questions. If you have a question, would you please raise your hand? See, I saw there was one. Okay, we have one question. Janet Cannon, let me unmute you.
I think I got it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. It's a vague-ish question. I was involved with the SARA program over the last couple of years, and I don't know if Erane knows the answer to this, but is there any way for them to activate the unused federal money that the Republicans did not authorize and allocate, or is that all done? And I guess for Dan, other than taking time to come and volunteer at one of the warming centers or at Delonis, are there other, what do you think would be effective community action to work toward a solution?
You asked me the question first, so I'll go.
Sure,
And the reality is, I don't know the definitive answer to that. I can tell you what we've been told through Hawk, who is the HARA for this particular county, is that the funding has been allocated in such a way that now it can't be used for what it was used for before. It's more for administratively setting up the programs that we now have, which is the SER and the and whatever remaining funding that Hawk has. So some of that is being utilized. And I don't know if you're talking about from the federal standpoint. I can tell you what has been passed through to the state. What has been passed through to this state is now being utilized through Hawk. But there's very limited funding there for that. And so you still have to apply. That's what they're waiting that 3 months for before you can get in to even see Hawk and determine whether or not you're eligible for it. So I believe what is left for this state and allocated to this county is still being utilized. It's just a very slow process.
Does everybody, I'm not sure everyone knows what Hawk is, if you haven't been in contact with
the
it.
Housing Association for Washtenaw County.
Yeah, so that's the first stop for anybody looking for help.
Well, SER is, you have to apply to SER first, state emergency relief. And if you're denied for that, then and we tell people to apply at the same time so that you can begin the process and go as quickly as possible. But yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think action locally, you mentioned volunteering, you mentioned a big one right now is I think there's going to be, I mentioned the affordable housing that's going up with the city. There's going to be an opportunity to create like a YIMBY movement. I would hope so. Yes, in my backyard, because they have over, I think 10 properties that they're looking to move, and it's all downtown area, which from the shelter's perspective is great if we can get a lot of supportive housing there, because our guests that move into housing, they often come back for dinners, and it creates this community where folks can they come out and they say, I'm doing well, and they encourage each other. And if they're living right down the street, at the Catherine Ann lot or something like that, or the library lot, that would be a really positive win for our guests and building that affordable housing stock. So I think that would be something that's coming up really, really soon outside of, getting involved locally with the shelter. I can definitely, you can reach out to me directly. I can share my cell phone and any opportunities that come up for engagement.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Joanne McCullum, your mic is open, so you can talk.
Hello, thank you. Yes, my name is Joanne McCullum. I'm a community advocate also for the eastern part of Washtenaw County, and the housing is really challenged right now, of course. But I wanted to ask, I'm trying to help with getting a Ypsilanti tenants union. It started late last year. I was wondering if that is something, I know it can't help like people who are homeless, but is there something someone they could connect with to help that people don't get evicted from their homes? Thank you.
I'll take that question on just a little bit. I was looking at some of your information. I saw it was posted on the next door neighborhood next door, or whatever that's called. And I know that you have legal services coming out. So I think that one of the best ways you can help tenants is to have them informed and educated about the process. We have so many people that just don't even show up to court. Like, if they know that you can show up, when you show up, that will help you to stave it off at least for a little while, and maybe give you an opportunity to get the funding from somewhere, family or through one of these programs. And at least having the knowledge gives you more of an opportunity, because if you don't show up at all, then it's going to happen very quickly. If you don't show up twice, you're going to get the judgment, and then you're going to have an eviction on your record. And that is happening for people who even have Section 8. We have got to inform the individuals about what their rights are in this process. And I think that's the best way to help people not get evicted. And you become educated in that. So if they ask you questions about it, you know a little bit of at least where to turn them to in terms of resources.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I guess just one more thing about advocacy in general I thought of, which is the Washtenaw Housing Alliance. They're our local advocacy organization. They were instrumental for getting the millage passed and a lot of really powerful initiatives around that. And you can find their contact info online, Washtenaw Housing Alliance. That's another great organization to get involved with on kind of bringing together, different organizations and community leaders around this important crisis.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I know we have one more question in queue, but I have to move on to the next part of the meeting. We're already a little bit behind schedule. Just want to thank Dan Kelly and Judge Washington for speaking with us today, and we're going to come back to this issue. Thank you. I'd now like to move to the next part of our meeting, the labor movement priorities for the Democratic State Legislature and in Washtenaw County. And the first speaker is Ian Robinson, the president of the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation. Ian Robinson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eli. Can you make me a co-host so that I can share some slides?
I believe you can share slides to the panelists. Why don't you try doing it now?
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, that looks like it works.
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm going to take them off for a second here, but I just wanted to thank, my name is Ian Robinson. I'm the president of Huron Valley Area Labor Federation, and also a faculty member at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor in the sociology department in the residential college, and a member of the union of faculty there, LEO, which is part of AFT Michigan. I wanted to thank the Washtenaw County Dems for making room for us to share with you what our priorities are in the year ahead, this critical year, as Jeff Irwin was saying earlier. So important that we take full advantage of the opportunities that are presented by having a Democratic trifecta for the first time in so long. So we're going to talk some about what the labor movement's priorities are in this critical year at the state level, where I'm really going to be summarizing for you some of the decisions that have been made by the State Federation of Labor. Then we're going to talk about what Huron Valley Area Labor Federation's priorities are for this county and the other counties we're responsible for, but we're strongest here in Washtenaw. We do probably most of the important initiatives that we take start out here because of that. And then we're going to turn it over to a panel of 7 union leaders from affiliated local unions that are part of Huron Valley Area Labor Federation to give you a more fine-grained analysis of what does these larger discussions actually mean on the ground for them, and what things in addition maybe to the legislative and policy issues that I'll be talking about, are they also trying to pursue through collective bargaining and other kinds of strategies at the local level. So I think together you should get a really good sense of what the labor movement aims to do in this year ahead. As a little bit of, before I launch into what the state level priorities are in terms of what we hope to achieve in Lansing, I want to give you a little bit of background, and that's where these slides come in. So I will go to screen share now. Here we go. So one piece of background, well, let me first just get this on to display. One critical piece, I think, is labor movement is a complicated beast. There are a lot of levels to it and a lot of pieces. So I thought I'd just give you a very quick overview. You know, we as the local level of the American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial Organizations, which is AFL-CIO for short, are part of this layered structure that at the national level is comprised of 58 national unions affiliated with the AFL-CIO. And those 58 national unions represent around 12.5 million active union members. Of course, they're also connected through those union members and through structures like retired organizations of retired union members to a lot of quote unquote inactive union members. Of course, some retired union members are as active or more active than they were when they were active, because now they have a lot more time available. It's important to note that the AFL-CIO does not encompass all of the major unions in the United States. There are 3 big ones in particular that are not part of the AFL-CIO structure. The National Education Association, which here in Michigan, it's the Michigan Education Association, is not part of that. Although we tend to cooperate closely, particularly the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, which is in the AFL-CIO, works closely with the NEA. at all levels, the SEIU, which stands for Service Employees International Union, and the Teamsters. So they together, those three, and there are a bunch of smaller ones as well, but those are the three that really, I think, are most significant among the unaffiliated unions, add up to another 5 million or so active union members. At the Michigan level, the AFL-CIO encompasses about 600,000 active union members and another 600,000 retirees, and then there are the families as well. And the retirees are well organized in Michigan, particularly the UAW retirees. UAW invested a lot of effort in making sure that when people retired, they stayed active. And we now have, as our secretary of the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation is responsible for the retirees organization of her local union, which we're going to be hearing about from Representative Jimmy Wilson. Sheila's union is the same as Jimmy's. So we'll hear about that soon enough. These Michigan 600,000 active members are organized into about 40 state level unions, and they're familiar acronyms to you perhaps. UAW is certainly AFSCME, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, American Federation of Teachers, IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. You'll be hearing from leaders of locals of all four of those unions, as well as three others later today. And then at our level, Huron Valley Area Labor Federation, we have about 18,000 active union members that are organized into 50 local unions. And those locals are part of 28, that should say national, not local unions, 28 national unions. So AFSCME, for example, is one of the national unions, one of those 28 nationals, and there are 11 locals from AFSCME alone that are in the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation. Okay, we move on to the next slide. I want to give a little historical background as well. Union density, which is a pretty good proxy for labor movement power in the United States, at least, is a term that really means what share of the workers that could belong to unions actually do. And so here you can see the trajectory of union density in the United States for 120 years. You can see the enormous growth, very, very rapid growth that came out of the 1930s to peak in the mid-50s at about 35% union density in the United States as a whole. And in Michigan, it would have been something on the order of 55%, well off the scale. By the time we get to this intersection point where the data breaks out the public sector from the private sector around 1972, you can see that union density has declined in the United States taken as a whole to about 27%. In Michigan at this point, it's about 45%. So it's right up around here. By the present time, or close to it, most recent data, we have, you can see a level of union density in the nation as a whole, just slightly above 10. And Michigan now, as a result of all of the legislative changes and other factors that have been going on, this restructuring, the loss of manufacturing employment as a result of NAFTA and similar neoliberal trade agreements, we are down to about 13%. So we're not nearly as far above the national average now, which is maybe 11 to 13, as we were back here when it was 27 versus 45. So we are converging towards a low level of union density here in Michigan, and that's not an accident or a natural phenomenon. It's also a phenomenon that has a lot of implications that go well beyond the 11% or in Michigan 13% of the workforce that are actually in unions. It fundamentally impacts the overall level of economic inequality in our country. And this graph shows in the blue line union density. They say membership, but really it's union density percentage terms, not an absolute number of members. And then in the red line is the share of all national income going to the top 10% of the population. And you can see they're kind of mirror image of one another. That's because there's causality involved here. That's because as union density declines, inequality rises. And the two are very closely linked, because labor movements are by far the most powerful factor influencing both collective bargaining, obviously, because only unions are able to engage in collective bargaining, but also in influencing laws and policies that have the effect of either increasing or reducing economic inequality. So another way to look at this, the deeper causality is that once unions' power declined, and the turning point was around 1955, but the real threshold is reached at this point around in the mid 70s, wages for real wages compensation, not just wages, but wages and benefits, flatten out. So we've had increased productivity in terms of how much value per hour of work done do workers can do in the American economy. It's gone up just as steadily after 1975 as it did before. It's almost a straight line, right? But instead of the way it worked for the first 30 years after World War II, when unions were strong enough to ensure that workers got a fair share of that increased productivity growth, as labor power declined, you see that that line at an average level, of course, there's lots of variation around it in particular workers and working groups, occupational groups, but the average is a flat line basically after you take account of inflation. So, that's what we've experienced. And here's another way of looking at it. This shows that redistribution, that money that would have gone to workers had labor movement power been strong enough to keep capturing our fair share of the productivity growth in the economy, instead went not just to the top 10%, most of it went to the top 1%. And you can see that the black line here is the United States. UK and Canada look pretty similar. And the fact that you have a number of countries that look pretty similar has encouraged some people to say, well, this must be due to something like, beyond the United States, like globalization or technological change or something like this, rather than the labor movement power kind of explanation I've just shared with you. But here's a little bit of evidence. We don't go into a lot of detail, but here's a little bit of evidence contrary to that. If you look at these three countries where labor unions are considerably stronger than the United States, especially, of course, in Sweden, but also in Japan and France, you can see that there is no increase in the share going to the 1%, or if there is, it's a tiny, very, very shallow increase. It's an L-shaped curve rather than a U-shaped curve. And that tells you there isn't something exogenous to the USA that's forcing all countries, regardless of how strong their unions might be, to experience the same kind of dramatic increase in inequality and enrichment of the 1% that we've seen here in the US. It's really a function of the balance of power in this country and the policy changes that result from that balance of power. And to go to the question of, well, why then has union power declined so much? Why has union density declined so much? There are really three factors that I'm going to highlight. There's more, it's a complicated phenomenon, but I'm going to highlight these three. The first is just the US economy, like all the other economies in those graphs, grows every year. And the US economy has grown at a rate such that we need to add about 1 million new workers to unions, organize them into unions every single year, just to stabilize union density at whatever level it might be. And in fact, we've found very, very difficult to organize even close to that many new members, in spite of the fact that there's a very high demand among the unorganized workers for unions. Recent surveys show that more than half of all the unorganized workers in this country, which is like 90%, 89%, and therefore 45% of all unorganized, of the entire workforce of the US that is not in unions, say they would vote for a union tomorrow in their workplace if they were ever given that opportunity. Most of them don't get that opportunity. And the reason is because it's extremely expensive under the existing labor law regime in the United States to run a successful organizing campaign. Unions do put a lot of money into organizing, but because of how expensive it is, it's not nearly enough even to get to that 1 million per year to break even, let alone to reverse the decline of union density. And one of the reasons it's so expensive is because that labor law regime allows a very high level of employer resistance to union organizing efforts. In principle, the Wagner Act says that unions should be able, that workers have the right in this country, the Wagner Act being the New Deal legislation of 1935 that gave workers the right to organize in a legal right at the federal level for the categories of private sector workers covered by that law. it basically says every worker has the right to form a union, and the employer should not impede that effort. We're a very long way from the spirit of the Wagner Act at this point. You know, companies like Walmart, Starbucks, Amazon, that until very, very recently had zero unionization, even though they have massive workforces and they have unions in other countries, have completely avoided it here by spending millions of dollars on union busting law firms that figure out all kinds of ways of undermining organizing campaigns, terrifying or tricking workers into voting against unions. It's a massive industry and a pretty effective one. It's also true that if unions do successfully organize, and that's kind of where the Starbucks workers are in the country right now, the employer is extremely skillful, if they want to be, at resisting actually signing a first collective agreement. And if a new union can't get a first collective agreement, it typically dies because workers understandably say, well, what was the point of this enormous effort if we can't even get a collective agreement out of it? But not content to stop there, employers, and especially the big ones, have funded organizations like the American Legislative Exchange Council, which has developed an agenda which they push in every state in the union to basically weaken unions by making legal changes at the state level. And in Michigan, we saw what that ALEC agenda looks like in the Snyder years from 2010 to 2018. And that's going to take us really to where we are in terms of, this is a short list. This is not the full comprehensive list of what Snyder did in his 8 years, but these are the most top priority things he did that made the biggest damage to the level of income that unions get from members and non-members that they are required under law to provide services for and to bargain on behalf of. Like all non-union members in the United States and in Michigan are covered by the collective agreement that it pertains to the bargaining unit those non-members are in. Not only that, so they benefit from whatever's in that collective agreement. Not only that, but because the collective agreement includes provisions on grievances and other kinds of very labor-intensive challenges that unions sometimes have to make to employers because they're not following the collective agreement in the judgment of the union. The union is required to provide those services as well for non-members. So what right to work law does is it says, well, you still have all those legal obligations, union, but you can no longer charge non-members a service fee that attempts to estimate and then charge the cost of what it takes to provide those services to non-union members. So they completely free ride as a result of a right to work law, whereas in the absence of one, usually what unions do is negotiate into their collective agreement with the employer a provision that says non-members will be charged a service fee less than membership dues, but high enough that it can cover the costs of providing those kinds of legally required services to that group. So right to work laws cancel out the union's ability to sort of charge those services and therefore reduces significantly the revenue streams that unions have. A second initiative on the part of the Snyder GOP was eliminating the state prevailing wage. This is a really critical institution that the federal government first introduced way back in the 1930s, but state governments also have versions. And it basically says that if you're going to take state money as to partially or fully fund some kind of construction project, then any contractor who gets that work has to pay this prevailing wage, which is calculated by averaging the union and non-union wages in the particular area where that work is going to take place. So the prevailing wage is never as high as the union wage, but especially if unions are fairly strong in that area, the prevailing wage won't be very far below the union wage, and therefore it sets a kind of floor that has the effect of the union contractors can compete more effectively with the non-union contractors because the gap in wages, which is a significant part of their overall cost structure, is not really that big. And moreover, it's a benefit to the unions. They're more likely to get jobs involving state funding if there's a prevailing wage law. It's also a benefit to the non-union workers because anytime they're working they're doing work for their contractors for the state that involves any state money, they're going to get paid much more than they do on non-state contracting jobs. They're going to get almost up to where the union wage is. So eliminating the prevailing wage takes that floor out from underneath the wage structure in the construction industry and hurts unions, but also non-union workers. Prohibition on payroll deductions. It costs nothing to deduct stuff from payroll. All of your various federal and state deductions from your payroll, they're just built into the employer's overall system of, and it's the same with union dues, and it's the same with any political action committee deductions that a union member might agree to have, and that they can't happen unless the union member agrees, and they only occur with union members. They don't happen with non-union members, these political action committees. But one of the laws passed in Snyder outlawed that, so that could no longer happen, even though it was no cost to the employer. The employer didn't have a choice about it. The state overruled whatever the employer might want to do, and basically said you won't be able to do this anymore. So that obviously harmed. It made the union have to work harder, take more time, expend more staff resources to try to collect probably a smaller amount of PAC money than would have been the case if workers could just say, yeah, I'm willing to commit to the PAC, take it off my monthly paycheck, and that's all the worker has to do, and that's all the union has to do. It saves an enormous amount of time and per staff, and time is money, and money can be used for organizing, money can be used for mobilizing members into politics. You use up that money and force the unions to allocate it to this unnecessary kind of activity, and that is exactly the point of a provision like that. That applied to the entire public sector that's covered by Michigan state law, by the Public Employees Relations Act, PARA for short, in Michigan. There was a special law just singling out K-12 teachers, though, that added that not only could you not do payroll deduction for political action committees, you couldn't do it either for union dues deductions. And that forced the teachers unions, both the MEA and the AFT, to spend a lot of extra time, resources, and money just trying to collect dues from people who were already members, were happy to be members, wanted to pay, but could no longer do it in this automatic way. So that was a huge waste of resources. Again, exactly the intent of a law like that. And finally, there were a bunch of laws that narrowed collective bargaining rights. In other words, they made it impossible, illegal to bargain certain kinds of things. This kind of thing was carried the furthest in Wisconsin under Act 10, under Walker there, where basically the public sector unions were prevented from negotiating anything except wages, and even wages they couldn't take inflation into account. It was incredibly restrictive. Michigan's restrictions were not quite as extensive as Wisconsin's, but among other things, they prevented K-12 teachers from negotiating anything to do with class sizes, which is a huge issue, not only for the teachers, because it's about workload for them, but for the community and for the parents and the students, because class size is a very important determinant, obviously, of quality of education that they're receiving. So those are the most important laws that were passed in the Snyder era trifecta by the GOP, with a view to weakening the financial resources of unions and therefore making it even harder for them to find the resources necessary to do the organizing, to even try to stay level, to keep union density level, let alone to increase it again. So not surprisingly, rolling back those 5 anti-union measures is a top priority for the labor movement in 2023. Rolling them back doesn't solve our problems. Union density was declining before this stuff was introduced, but it gives us more resources to try and address the underlying problems for sure. The 6th priority and these 6 emerged from a general board meeting of the state Fed, where all the leadership of all the major unions in Michigan got together to identify what they in common could get behind in terms of prioritizing in 2023. The 6th one, which doesn't really count as something negatively impacting union finances, is reversing the pension tax that Snyder imposed in 2011. Some of you will remember that he made a massive corporate tax rate cut, it created a $1 billion hole in the Michigan state budget. And Michigan states, unlike the federal government, are constitutionally required to balance their budget each year. So that hole had to be filled. And the way Snyder chose to fill it was by imposing new taxes on pension fund recipients, particularly public sector pension funds, which had not been taxed before. As partial, I guess, a kind of a trade-off between not having wages that were competitive often with the private sector, but they tended to have pretty good benefits in the public sector. And that kind of not having your pension taxed was part of that, better benefits equation in the public sector in Michigan. So those are the 6 altogether laws that it's a top priority to roll back. As it says here, doing that's not going to be enough. We need to invest additional resources in new organizing, and we need to do that at a level we've never done before. And we need to figure out new ways of organizing as well that are less expensive than the ways that are more traditionally been followed under the constraints of the Wagner Act. We also need to implement pro-worker and economic social policies, and not just return to the pre-2010 status quo ante, which was really the laws on the books by 2010 are the laws that resulted from 30 years of neoliberal restructuring. They're very, very far from pro-labor laws. We've gone a very long way in the direction of anti-labor free market ideology in the United States and in Michigan, and we're going to have to tackle some of those things too. So turning to the Huron Valley priorities in the time remaining to me, we're in a position here because we had a more progressive political environment where the Democratic Party was strong and we have a good alliance with the Democratic Party. We don't have to roll back a huge amount of anti-labor legislation and policy. We need to take advantage of the fact that we have a very pro-labor environment, comparatively speaking, anyway, in Washtenaw County, to show the lead, to take the lead and show the way forward in a proactive way about how is the labor movement and with it a national and a state and a local economy that actually supports working people and helps us to benefit from the overall growth and innovation that's happening in our economy. How is that going to work? Well, how would that look? So here are some of the things that we're doing in Washtenaw County, where we'll need the help of our allies in the governments of the cities and in the county to make these things happen, some of them anyway. The very first one here is we've created a new entity called the Huron Valley Worker Organizing and Research Center in the spring of this year, or last year, 2022. Its mission is to figure out new ways of organizing the unorganized, ways that don't involve as much money, ways that involve a lot more of getting training and support to workers who can then take the initiative the way we've seen the Starbucks workers take the initiative, the way we've seen the Amazon workers in New York take the initiative. So it won't rely on a massive union campaign, but it will still have union support. Our labor movement is funding this worker center because we know that we can't do all the organizing that needs to get done by union campaigns alone. And then a second thing here is the Ann Arbor City Council and other electeds. I know that it's already on record as saying that we want to repeal Michigan's preemption law that prevents local governments from setting a minimum wage or any other kind of labor market regulation at the local level. For example, we could regulate the incredibly awful hours that a lot of scheduling issues that have become oppressive for private service sector workers who don't know what their work schedule will be from 1 week to the next, or even sometimes 1 day to the next, or are asked to come in 2 times or 3 times and not a day and not paid for the time in between. There's just a whole bunch of scheduling issues that have reached outrageous proportions, which could be regulated at the local level if we had the power to do so, and we need to eliminate that preemption law in order to make that possible. So I hope to work closely together with those in city and county government, as well as at the state level, obviously, where the law actually exists and has to be repealed to make that happen. So that's a second thing we're working on. A third one is we know that there's going to be a rapid transition to renewable energy and sustainable forms of transportation, housing, et cetera. There has to be. We absolutely 100% behind the need for that transition. We fully acknowledge and support it, but it has to be done in a union-friendly way. And that is not going to happen automatically. In fact, if we leave it to automatic sort of in place kind of systems and tendencies, it'll be anti-worker, it'll be anti-labor, as most major transitions in this economy have been historically, if not all. So to be proactive about that, to identify, well, what would a pro-worker approach to these kinds of transitions look like? We created a new committee of Huron Valley this year, or again, last year, early in 2022, called the Just Transitions Committee. And it has building trades worker leadership on it who will actually do a lot of the work that makes these transitions happen on the ground. But it also has a lot of people from public sector unions who study or work on the development of policy around environmental issues. And so understand the science and understand the technologies involved in these transitions. So we're going to take it upon ourselves to try to figure out, both for the workers whose jobs are disappearing as a result of this transition in sectors that are often quite highly organized into unions, but also for the new jobs that are being created, often without any kind of union representation in those new jobs. We're going to figure out how do we actually turn those into union and worker-friendly jobs. And then we're going to be coming to the city of Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County, planning both the administration and the council and board of those entities and saying, okay, well, we need to incorporate these kind of elements into the plans that already exist and are constantly being revised and updated as we move towards the deadlines for net zero emissions that those plans set. Another of our initiatives is really, it's critical to develop a more worker-friendly culture that values what we have to contribute to problem solving in the organizations that we work in than we have today. We have strong Democratic majorities on the U of M's Board of Regents, on the County Commission's Board of Commissioners, of course, in the city of Ann Arbor, and yet, especially in the county and at U of M, we've been dealing for years with administrations that have a very adversarial HR culture. We're always having fights with them on things that I think we don't need to have. And you're going to hear more about what some of those fights are. I mean, we need to have the fights because they insist on behaving this way, but it's wrong and it needs to be changed, and we're committed to changing it with working with our allies on the relevant boards so that we don't waste all this time with unnecessary fights, instead of taking advantage of the knowledge and skills and dedication that our members have to help our counties and our university, the biggest employer in our county and one of the biggest in the state, solve their problems rather than trying to solve them unilaterally and coming up with inferior decisions to what they would have made had they consulted with us. We're also going to be wanting to work with our Democratic allies on these boards to increase staffing and reduce the workload currently borne by health and human service providers. It was bad before COVID. COVID made it much, much worse. The level of burnout and quits, the level of turnover resulting from that is at unprecedented levels. As a result, the workload on the people that remain is at unprecedented levels. Their stress loads are higher than ever. They're under more and more pressure to quit or move on to some place where they're not faced with such workload challenges, overwhelming workload challenges. So we're caught in a vicious circle right now, and we need to break out of this, not only for the sake of the workers who are under these extraordinary pressures, but for the sake of the public whose quality of service, both health and human services, is declining because the workers simply can't provide the same quality of service when they're under that kind of overload and stress. Last couple of items. We need to end our reliance on overseas sweatshops for clothing that's purchased by our governments, our city, our county, our cities. We'll start with Ann Arbor because it's it's the biggest and the strongest of the cities in terms of fiscally. But ultimately, all of our public entities need to not be continuing to spend taxpayer dollars on apparel for their employees that is made under sweat-free conditions. And the first step to that is to pass the sweat-free ordinance that basically lays out we are committed to not doing that and to finding pathways by which to acquire apparel for our employees that is not made under those conditions. And a critical step in that is to join the Sweat-Free Purchasing Consortium, of which, full disclosure, I am now the president of that organization. It has 7 major cities that are part of it, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, and Portland, Oregon, several others. So we'll be working to encourage the city of Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County to pass sweat-free ordinances and join the Sweat-Free Purchasing Consortium. And last, but certainly not least, we have a good relationship with Washtenaw County Democratic Party. That's why we're here today. They've made the space for us to speak with you and to share our perspectives and our goals with you, but it can be improved. There's important ways to strengthen communications and coordination between us, and we are going to be working on that in the year ahead and beyond. Thank you very much. That's my phone telling me to stop. I will stop screen sharing and turn it over to our panel, or maybe to Eli. I don't know how we're going to introduce the panel.
I'm going to try screen sharing when you get off the agenda, which will inform the audience of who's on the panel, since it is quite a significant group. We have 7 panelists. See if I can. Unfortunately, at this time of the day on Saturday, Zoom kind of slows down. So its responses to all my kind of changes, like screen sharing, kind of are slow. So these are the panelists. I'm going to ask them to speak in alphabetical order by last name, and starting with Jared Eno, president of Michigan Graduate Employees Association.
Thanks, Eli, and thanks, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So I'm Jared Eno. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a grad student here at the University of Michigan and president of the Graduate Employees Organization, AFT Michigan Local 3550. Really excited to be here with you today. Glad this is happening. I appreciate you having us. I just wanted to say a little bit about GEO to start off. We are local of graduate student instructors, which is our name for teaching assistants, and graduate student staff assistants, who are folks who do administrative and service work. And our bargaining unit during the academic year is about 2,400 workers. That's drawn from the population of about 18,500 grad students at UM. That's both doctoral and master's students. And grad workers at UM are facing a real affordability crisis right now. We are paid less than 2/3 of a living wage, even though UM is one of the richest public universities in the nation, of course, with an endowment of over $17 billion. The gap between our pay and a living wage has been increasing as the cost of living has gone up, and it now stands at about $14,500. So we're in contract negotiations with the university right now. And grad workers have put together a platform that's based on the idea of affordability and dignity for all grad workers. And one of our central demands is a living wage for all grads. I want to say a little bit about our campaign here, because we often encounter folks, including many grad students, who think of grad workers as basically kind of a bunch of overprivileged kids. I'm not a kid anymore, but I am a legacy student and pretty overprivileged myself, so I can understand that view personally. But I am less and less representative of grad students at UM, and I think the goal is always to make grad school representative of everyone, including just higher ed in general. The problem is that grad school at the university is still largely built for a single, fully able-bodied person with no kids or caregiving duties, and plenty of intergenerational wealth to draw on. And what we're trying to do is to make grad school a place where anyone can go. You know, there are so many people who don't go to grad school or don't even consider it because they know they can't afford it, or because it's impossible if you have kids, or because it's so rife with harassment and discrimination. And other people go anyway, but find it's not possible, and then are left with nothing but a lot of debt and a lot of trauma. That's just unacceptable. And it's workers who are really trying to make the material and deep changes needed to make the university's commitment to DEI, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, real. So I'm actually going to start with an immediate ask of you all. Our members have voted to make our current bargaining sessions open and transparent, which Ian and others can tell you is kind of standard practice here at UM, at least on the academic side. But the university seems to be kind of singling out GEO for differential treatment and has been fighting us for months to shut members out of the bargaining room. We were in contract negotiations yesterday, and HR actually just walked out of the room over this issue. So we could really use some community support to just tell university HR that they should come to the bargaining table and negotiate with us. It's really all we're asking at this point, is just to talk to us face to face. We have an open letter that allies can sign on to, and I'll drop it in the chat after I'm done talking. It would make a big difference to grad workers if you all could sign, as many of our comrades here have already done. I want to mention a particular part of our platform that links to a really exciting local public safety initiative that you all can support. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called CROWS, the Coalition for Re-envisioning Our Safety. This is a community-based initiative for an unarmed, non-police crisis response line. The idea is to create a phone number that you can call when there's an emergency that will bring trained professionals who are there with resources to help, not just a cop with a gun. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear that there are many instances where the police are called that don't need an armed officer. So this would be a different option that people could call for help. I will again drop a link to CROWS' website where you can learn more after I'm done. But this is an evidence-based program that's been endorsed by over 40 community organizations, including GEO. CROWS hopes to serve all of Washtenaw County, including UM's Ann Arbor campus. So we're pushing the university to pay its fair share. And we strongly encourage you all to dedicate annual funding to this program, which really promises to save lives and make our community safer. Now, in terms of legislative priorities for our members, I want to go back to something Ian mentioned about restoring collective bargaining rights. Graduate student research assistants at UM successfully organized about a little more than a decade ago, but then Presidents Mary Sue Coleman teamed up with Republicans to reclassify GSRAs as students rather than workers, who therefore do not have collective bargaining rights. And these grad workers should be entitled to the same rights as any other worker. And there are other ways that the university uses this student category to force people to work without pay. Masters of social work students are required to do over 900 hours of field placement work, usually without any pay. And when they are paid, it can be for as little as $1 an hour or less. These folks are often doing similar, if not the same work as people who are just getting paid for doing their jobs. And these MSW students are going into really massive debt to pay tuition and live while effectively working jobs for no pay. So they've created the Payment for Placements initiative, calling for a minimum wage of $20 an hour for field placements, which is now part of our union's campaign as well. So we need a way to legislatively contest this classification of students as non-workers. Finally, the cost of living in Washtenaw County, as I mentioned, is a huge issue for our members, particularly because of the skyrocketing rent. This is a state issue, but ending the ban on rent control is really important for grad workers and many others, not just because it's necessary to keep rents under control in Ann Arbor, Ypsi, and elsewhere, but also because rent control is crucial for other tenant protections. Without rent control, landlords can basically evict people by just jacking up their rent. So we need to end the ban on rent control and enact rent control in Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County. Our members would also greatly benefit from stronger enforcement of existing tenants' rights laws. We found that enforcement is often effectively left up to tenants themselves and unpaid activists. For instance, GEO and the Ann Arbor City Council recently worked together to pass this right to renew legislation, giving all tenants the option to renew their leases and preventing landlords from evicting them without a good reason. But that bill currently has no enforcement mechanism, and that's a real disappointment to us. And we hope that Dems in Ann Arbor City government and elsewhere can take proactive action to make sure that landlords are following that law and are following other tenants' rights laws. So I'll drop my email in the chat. If you have any questions or would like to chat, please just get in touch, and I'll drop the other links I mentioned as well. Thanks a lot, and solidarity.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to turn the mic over to Nancy Heine, President of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 3052.
Thank you so much for having me here today, as well as the rest of the panelists. I'm a Washtenaw County long-term employee supervisor. I've been the president of AFSCME Local 3052 for 15 plus years here at the county. The other president, Mary Campbell of AFSCME Local 2733, we were supposed to tag team kind of today, but she had personal issues come up. So I'm going to be handling it basically for both of our locals. What I was going to talk about today during my time is talk a little bit about the historical perspective as an employee and a union member here at Washtenaw County, since I've been an employee for more than 30 years, and then talk a little bit about our struggles and give a specific example of a struggle that we've had recently, and then follow it up at the end with our goals for at least for the next upcoming year and beyond. So historically, Washtenaw County used to be a coveted employer to work for. When I first came into the county, took a long time, had to come in actually as a part-time worker. The county was recognized, Washtenaw County was recognized as a fantastic employer. And I came from the U of M. The county had great benefits. They had good pay. They had lots of holidays. They had good vacation, sick time, all the benefits. It was considered a fantastic place to work. Not only that, it was a place where you could go and have a career job. You could have a secure employment for the rest of the time that you work, and then you would retire out with a pension. And the county has envisioned that perspective for employees back in the day. And I was thankful to come into the county, thankful that I got a county job and came in and began to work at the county, enjoyed it. Through some initial very negative impacts at the state, things changed around 2011, 2012. As we all know, the bubble burst, housing bubble burst, and trickle-down effect created a negative financial issue with the county budget, Washtenaw County budget. Not only that, we had the Republicans in control up at the state. Snyder and his group were getting rid of either completely reduced or completely got rid of revenue sharing. There was other pressures from the top of the state to shut down our pensions and to move everybody over to combined contribution, defined contribution plans, and to, as a matter of fact, the state workers, their plan shut down, and I believe they're still at defined contribution plan. These were pressures that were put on counties, state, townships to do the same thing. And one of the things that came up with the county is during the time frame that they were having their financial problems, the unions were asked to come to the table and give concessions. All of the union locals at the county came in good faith, came and actually put a lot of things on hold and gave up. We gave up raises. We froze our pay. We gave up longevity. We gave up lots of other things. We gave up our longevity. We gave up health benefits. We took unpaid bank days, which means we didn't get paid for 8, 10, 12 days out of the year to help the county out of their debt. Unfortunately, once things cleared up and got better, things didn't go so well for the unions. And we've been playing catch up ever since. Some of the benefits that we gave away, we never got back. And when we've tried to give them back, it's been a really big struggle with the unions. So now fast forward to where we're at now, continuing to fight to get back benefits that we gave up back in 2013. We now are struggling with negotiating contracts. My particular local was in contract negotiations for 1.5 years over trying to get a 1-year contract for the employer wanted us to do that. They were looking for us to get a short-term contract, my local to get a short-term contract so that we could align our contract with all the others, which were all expiring at the end of 2023. Took us 1.5 years to negotiate a 1-year contract. One of the big struggles that we had is back in the very beginning, the county was initiating a compensation study and had contracted with a vendor. And as part of our pre-negotiations, we asked for a copy of that full report, the copy of the full report. We were denied that. We submitted a para request and that was denied. So we had to file an unfair labor practice charge against the county to get a full copy of a report that they wanted us to negotiate for a compensation study. After months of haranguing between our attorney and the county's attorney, there was finally an agreement and we did get the full report. But it's behind the 8 ball in terms of getting our short-term contract done. So we decided to put that aside and to deal with the other issues we need to deal with to get through the rest of the negotiations that we needed to get done quickly. So we finally negotiated and agreed to have a contract this past October. So it's a short-term contract that will be expiring at the end of next year. We've had continued struggles with the county administration, and part of it has eroded our relationship with the commissioners. We have all Dems on Washtenaw County Commission at this point in time, and we have struggled because of the relationship with administration to affect a good relationship with our labor partners, which the county talks about all the time, and our Board of Commissioners. So we are hoping that with us aligning, the bargaining units have decided that we are going to align together a whole lot more, and we are more in lockstep now. My local in 2733 are very much aligned together now, and we do things together because there's strength in numbers. So due to the struggles that we've had with county administration, we don't anticipate that this is going to be a friendly and easygoing negotiations as we're going through this next year. So fast forward to our goals for this next year and beyond. We need fair wages, and we need fair wages without give-ups. And the give-ups would be giving away pay scales, giving away steps on those pay scales, giving away the hard stop at the top of the pay scale, giving up longevity, which are caveats that have been waived in front of us. We also contacted a couple of other counties in the area and FOIA'd their compensation study reports. And lo and behold, one of my members did a FOIA request. Lo and behold, within 7 days, received their full reports. So there's a problem there in Washtenaw County. Just want to reiterate that. We also need to restore the benefits that we lost back in 2013, have never been able to get back again. And we would like to solidify the work with our other unions and have increased staffing levels. Somebody brought up mental health. There was millage money approved for a crisis center, Washtenaw County, that closed down during the pandemic, has never reopened, and there's no plans to reopen that at this point. And there was millage money that was given specifically in Washtenaw County to have a crisis center. That needs to be reopened. We have staff that are coming in through CMH that are students right out of college. They come in and just stay long enough to get their licensures, and then they move on. We're in a constant state of short staffing, low staffing for county mandated services. I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ryan Hussey, Business Manager, International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, Local 252.
Well, thank you, Washtenaw Dems and Arbor Dems, and Happy New Year to everybody. I think new year brings new opportunity, new potential, and I've never really felt more of that there's that opportunity there for us than this year. And I'm really hoping we can capitalize on some things. My name's Ryan Hussey. I should have started there. I'm the business manager for IBW Local 252. We have jurisdiction in Washtenaw County, Jackson County, and the bottom 4 counties of both Livingston and Ingham County. We partner with over 60 local contractors to perform various scopes of work throughout the jurisdiction, including commercial, residential, and also low voltage. We're the second largest construction local in Michigan, with a 73% market share, which is the highest in the state of Michigan. We're 107 years old this June. Our pride and joy of Local 252 is our training center, which is located off of the service drive between US 12 and M52. That's where we train our apprentices and also our continuing education for journeyman, journey level. Some of that training includes electrical vehicle charging. That's the next big thing that we're seeing, and also solar. We do the solar training there, wind energy, conduit bending, first aid, CPR, etc. Apprenticeship is not the only way to go in the IBW. We do a lot of organizing. I have 2 full-time organizers that travel the jurisdiction and talk to unrepresented workers all across the jurisdiction. We're really trying to expand into some of these disadvantaged communities and introduce ourselves to them. We have some pre-apprenticeship programs now. The building trades is really focusing on getting into some of these communities that don't know about us. For too long, we've sat idle and waited for people to come to us. And we're really trying to expand through Access for All, pre-apprenticeship, helmets to hard hat for veterans, to get them into the trades. The IBW has a specific group called VEEP that's direct entry into our apprenticeship for veterans. We take a lot of pride in the work that we do and the opportunities that we offer for both apprentice and journey level. But we know that our mission doesn't stop there. Page 2 of our Constitution states our cause is the cause of human justice, human rights, and human security. Recently, on a organizing drive with United Electric, which is out of Lansing, we were talking to some of those workers, and they talked about some treatment that was just unbelievable to me in this day and age, and any day and age, but especially now, the racist acts by management there was, inward daily by management, derogatory comments about a Hispanic worker climbing a ladder, comparing that to people climbing over at the border wall. So we started helping these workers and got them in contact. They have a EEOC lawsuit pending now with United Electric, and there, then we find out later that there's a separate lawsuit by a HVAC company that were subject to nooses, on the job, inward written all over. So there's another lawsuit there, and unfortunately, we have a developer, in Ann Arbor, Landmark, that has decided to actually put both of those, that HVAC contractor and United Electric, on the same project, the Metropolitan, behind the Michigan Theater. So we've scheduled a event January 16th, 2:30. We're meeting at the Diag. Anybody that would like to join us, we're going to meet there at 2:30, and then we're going to walk over to probably that job site or their headquarters, or maybe even Michigan Theater. We're still shoring up the final plans for that. We participate in a lot of charitable efforts. One of my members was working at Mott's Children's Hospital around the holidays 22 years ago, and started Mott's Kids, where we raise money to help families that are experiencing overnight stays during the holidays. To date, we've raised about $142,000 for that. Then we go and buy gifts with that, so that all the kids that are staying overnight have a gift at Christmas time. Our apprentices started a Union for Life. It's called Union for Life charity that raises money for breast cancer awareness. We've always, Washtenaw Community College Foundation, school fundraisers, United Way, Meals on Wheels, Rockin' for the Hungry, Yankee Air Museum. We do a lot of charitable work there, and we've always been involved politically. We spent a lot of time working on Prop 2 of 2018 to get the maps, where they are today, so that we can have this conversation that we're having today about going on the offense instead of playing defense for the last 40 years. We participated in that, the comment period, anything associated with that. We're very, very proud to do that, and very happy to do that. Politically, like I said, we've always been involved. We have a pro-union president right now that is, passing a lot of bills, spending a lot of money on infrastructure, spending a lot of money on bringing manufacturing back to this country. We certainly saw the issues with the supply chain and ventilators and personal protection equipment for nurses and for the general public, for that matter. And it's nice to see that hopefully some of those jobs are coming back, and they can be, he's committed to paying, to providing good union paying jobs to those. And I think that, it kind of ties in with a lot of the things that we were talking about, at the start of this meeting with affordable housing. If we can provide good paying union jobs and make sure that these result in careers and not just jobs, I think that we can solve a lot of these problems together, and really, move forward with affordable housing and, careers to go with it, and with a majority in the Michigan House, we can, in the Michigan Legislature, we can shore those labor protections up even more. So, our important issue is obviously right to work and prevailing wage. We've got a real good chance here. And I just, I want to congratulate all the newly electeds that I know are on this call, and look forward to the future. And it's brighter than it's ever been in my lifetime. And I'm really looking forward to the next 2 years. So again, thank you all. Happy New Year. And I'm trying to get us back on time, Mr. Nathan. So I'm going to, I guess, end it there, and wish everybody a Happy New Year again. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's appreciated. And Jackson, in here in several capacities. One of them is representing the Michigan Nurses Association. You have the mic.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Ann Jackson. I'm a lifelong member of this Ann Arbor community. I'm a pediatric nurse at U of M for the past 38 years. I've been an active member of my union that entire time. Currently serving as a steward for ambulatory care, but I'm also past president of the local, which comprises 6,000 nurses. University of Michigan Professional Nurse Council is a local bargaining arm of the Michigan Nurses Association, which is our state union. But we're affiliated nationally with National Nurses United, which is over 225,000 nurses nationwide and has been growing exponentially during the pandemic for obvious reasons. With NNU's help, our nurses were able to work with the great Michigan Democratic legislators to push to get the OSHA emergency temporary standards passed for COVID protections in 2021. And so we very much appreciate that partnership. So with that said, for-profit healthcare is going to be the death of us all. Now, more than ever, we have come to understand how integral the functioning of our healthcare system is to the health of our community. U of M, like many other hospitals across the US, is suffering the effects of the ongoing pandemic. But much of what the nurses at U of M are suffering is a self-inflicted wound. In July of 2020, when fearing their margins would be at a deficit, the university imposed draconian austerity measures, including layoffs of large numbers of support staff that directly affected nurses' workload. We have yet to recover from it, partly because there is not the will on the part of the employer, as running so lean guarantees a large percentage over margin. And secondarily, the availability of all job classifications has not recovered from the beating we've taken throughout this never-ending pandemic. The nurses union was successful in getting a 22% raise over 4 years, but many of the other job classifications at U of M are underpaid. Thankfully, there are ongoing union efforts for our unorganized workers at U of M, and they need your support. U of M nurses know better than anyone that the strength of our union is the reason that our hospital is safer than most. We have a strong post right to work union density of above 90%, which is one of the things that Ian was speaking about earlier. The main wins of our last contract fight were enforceable nurse-patient ratios and the elimination of forced overtime. Although the overtime continues to be a struggle, research has shown time and time again that the number of patients a nurse is caring for directly impacts the safety of all of their patients. The same goes for overtime. The number of hours a nurse works in a row frequently without a break has a direct effect on patient safety. I just heard a story Thursday night of an ICU nurse who had been working until 2 p.m. from 7 a.m. in the morning, had not had a break, had not gone to the bathroom, who finally was able to get off the floor because her colleagues arranged for her to get that break. Nurses are leaving the bedside in droves because the current short staffing conditions don't allow them to provide the care that they need to adequately meet their patients' needs. Nurses leave long shifts beat down and demoralized, which is leading to moral injury, and it's increasing the rates of depression and suicide amongst our ranks. So what can you do to help, you ask? Well, universal healthcare in any form. I know Youssef had been working on a Michigan-based universal healthcare, and I, for one, would love to see that happen. Our state union, the Michigan Nurses Association, has repeatedly and will again in 2023 introduce the Safe Patient Care Act. What this encompasses is 3 parts. State mandated nurse-patient ratios to mirror the California law. Their research shows that it vastly improves patient outcomes. It would limit mandatory overtime, as you don't want a pilot who's gone a 16-hour shift, so why would you want a nurse who's working one? And lastly, it would require hospitals to disclose nurse-patient ratios to the public. If this law goes into place, it would affect all hospitals, both unionized and not. We ask for everybody's support on this legislation, and I have high hopes that it will make it out of committee this year. The American Hospital Association lobbies hard because they say it's too expensive, but the research out of California shows that in the long run, it saves us much more than it's ever going to cost. Locally, staffing at U of M is still challenging, especially in our ORs, our emergency rooms, and the Children's and Women's Hospital. In particular, our ORs and critical care areas. It takes upwards of 9 months to fully train nurses in these areas. By the time you have one fully trained, ready to go nurse, you've lost 2 more. Like hospitals across the US, our emergency rooms are routinely bursting at the seams with waiting rooms that are full and patients stuck on admit hold in the emergency room because all of the beds in the hospital are full. Any efforts on your part to strengthen our safety net and health infrastructure is much appreciated. Lastly, as spoken about throughout this conference, the barrier for nurses working at U of M is the cost of living in Ann Arbor, particularly the cost of housing. Less than 10% of our workforce lives locally. Most nurses travel an hour to and from work each day, adding to their fatigue. It's a commute they're willing to make because our strong 48-year-old nurses union has always pushed for competitive salaries and retirement benefits that we routinely fight to keep, as it is known as the golden handcuffs. It's the best in the state. But most importantly for me and most nurses who work is that my union gives me a voice to protect my patients' safety, because I can speak up without fear of retaliation with my union at my back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask Robert Jorg, Director of Advocacy for the Laborers International Union of North America. You can start speaking.
Thank you, Eli. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you on this January morning. My name is Robert George. I am the Director of Advocacy for the Michigan Laborers District Council, and I'm also a member of Laborers Local 499, which covers 9 counties across Southeast Michigan, just outside Metro Detroit, including Washtenaw County. And my local, Local 499, is headquartered here in the city of Ann Arbor. We are a construction building trades union similar to IBW and what Ryan discussed earlier. We do different types of construction, though, than what the IBW does. Our construction generally focuses around key infrastructure, core infrastructure items. So when you're talking about bridges, roads, underground work such as water, sewer, gas lines, as well as new construction. So, you know, when you're looking at new buildings that are going up, as well as focus on the energy sector. We do all types of energy, involved in all types of energy from fossil fuels to nuclear to renewables, especially on the big push right now across the state to increase our overall energy rate that we're getting from solar and wind farms. That's a big push for us right now on the expansion on wind, especially. So that's a little bit about what my union does. We represent roughly 14,000 active and retired members across the state of Michigan. We are the most diverse building trades union with roughly 35% of our membership being folks of color, which is a huge point of pride. My union has never been segregated since its founding at the turn of the 20th century there, which has been, our diversity is an item that we view as one of our main strengths. We were actually founded by an immigrant in 1903, which we have been continuously welcoming to folks that are looking to make a new life for themselves here in our great nation in Michigan, whether that's immigrants that are coming in from a different country, folks that are returning citizens. Similar to what Ryan said, we also have several programs there for returning citizens, veterans, very inclusive of folks that have served our country, and we are doing a lot of outreach to increase the overall percentage of our membership that is female. The building trades as a whole generally are behind where we need to be on gender equity, and it's something that we are very much aware of, participating in the Women in Construction initiatives across Michigan and so forth. But it's something that we are continuing to do and looking to make further progress on. Some of our key issues I know have been covered already by Ian, a little bit by Ryan. Obviously we are a huge supporter of a lot of the top line issues that Ian mentioned at the top of the program. But when we're looking at building trades issues, just to reinforce the importance of items like prevailing wage, about local control, these things are very important so that when you have a progressive community or a number of progressive communities like here in Washtenaw County, being able to set labor standards that are inclusive, that are favoring a equitable solution for both the government and the local community and workers. When you're looking, when I'm out talking with our members, folks that are working, between, anywhere from 5 to 6 or 7 12s, for 7 to 8 months out of the year when you can do outdoor construction. These folks that are spending 7, 8 hours on a jackhammer and then a few hours pouring concrete. These are folks that are doing demolition work, that are handling asbestos removal, dealing with dangerous chemical remediation in Superfund sites. These are folks that are out there, really doing backbreaking work at times, and to ensure that they have the proper labor protections and that being properly compensated is a huge item for us, and it's something that we like to think of ourselves as the progressive party on labor, and that the Democratic Party can really stand up and fight for working people. And the vast majority of folks really are that claim to be Democrats are really pro-labor. But we've noticed, especially of late, that there have been some folks that aren't necessarily as pro-labor, both in our own community, but across the state. I've even had elected officials say to me that my members that are doing this very dangerous and very hard work don't deserve to make more than $15 an hour. And, that is just frankly very insulting to the work that our members are doing. And it's something that, no worker should be making less than $15 an hour. I think that the $15 an hour, and this is we are a big supporter of the $15 an hour movement. That was a movement that started at the beginning of the 2010s, and with inflation, that number should be considerably higher than what it is now. And that is something that, my union has been, as a member of the AFL-CIO, a strong supporter of coalition building and supporting all of our friends in labor and our brothers and sisters in labor. And I think that's one of the great things about this panel today, is that being able to present all the different perspectives and different unique aspects of all the different labor unions, and that we're all fighting together, that, we're all supporting things that aren't necessarily directly that will benefit our members, but will benefit the overall movement, which we know as a whole that if one of our unions is strengthened, the whole labor movement is strengthened. And that's not just within the unionized sector, it's broadly speaking, because we know that oftentimes, I know in my industry and for my craft of work, but also across the board, when you've got a strong union sector, that those folks are then setting the wage and benefit benchmark for everybody, including the folks in the non-unionized sectors, which is a huge thing. It's a trickle-down effect, ironically enough. So, when we're looking at, how do we continue to move the ball forward on these things, continuing to, put pressure on local governments. My union is probably one of the most directly impacted by the decisions of local governments, whether or not they decide to use more progressive forms of procurement procedures, and how they decide to award contracts, awarding contracts to folks that have higher levels of training, of safety records, of environmental records, of workforce development, choosing contractors that employ local workers that are from our community and not folks that are from out of state. These are big things, especially when we've got a lot of infrastructure projects coming up locally, coming down from money coming down from the federal government. But, we've got, some really exciting opportunities with the Washtenaw Community Rec Center that's going to be coming in on the east side. So there's going to be a lot of great opportunities to support our hardworking members and support the labor movement. So thank you very much for the time, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you for keeping the time limit. Tricia Paff, President of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 3907. You've got the mic.
Morning. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great, thanks. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I mean, it is an honor to be side by side virtually with this panel of true labor giants. Quick disclaimer, so I can keep my job. I am not speaking in an official capacity on behalf of EPA. I am speaking in a personal union capacity and on my own time. I am the president of local AFGE 3907, and I represent employees at the Ann Arbor EPA Office of Transportation and Air Quality, also known as the National Vehicle and Fuel Emissions Lab. We are one of several AFGE locals representing federal employees in the surrounding area alongside VA and others. Our local represents about 250 bargaining unit employees, scientists, chemists, engineers, a wide range of environmental experts. Our lab's primary responsibility is to develop national regulatory programs to reduce air pollution from mobile sources. This includes on-road and non-road mobile sources, cars, trucks, but also forklifts, lawnmowers, and even aircraft. And protecting the planet is a big job. Delivering clean air and clean water to 330 million people across the country, you, your family, your friends, your neighbors, everyone on this call today. It's a big job, and it's why we're working so hard to protect the EPA workers, the people whose job it is to protect the planet. The issues facing these employees: not enough staffing, pending retirement cliff, pay grade suppression, and the inability to attract new employees and new talent. Drilling down into the staffing, it seems to be a common theme here. 5 years ago, EPA estimated that over half of the workforce would be eligible for retirement in 5 years. So here we are 5 years later, and we are starting to see and feel those retirements materialize. The worker shortage at EPA is serious. It is a detriment to the viability of our planet and all the breathers that call it home. Compounding this worker shortage, what I call a crisis, is the pay grade suppression. EPA pays scientists, engineers, chemists less today than they did 5 years ago. Even senior leaders in my office that I speak to in my union role have raised concerns about the pay grade suppression because they cannot attract the talent that we need to accomplish the mission. EPA is also reporting that nearly 1/3 of all the job offers that are made to candidates are turned down, a 29% declination rate. And while all this is going on, worker shortage, pay suppression, the climate is collapsing around us before our very eyes. You know, ice shelves are melting on one side of the earth while the other side of the earth is engulfed in wildfires or being ravaged by floods or hurricanes that are growing in strength because of global warming. And EPA's work is more urgent and it's more complex than ever. This is not the time to pay experts less while forcing inappropriate workloads on them. Our most valuable resource, these working conditions and workloads, it's inhumane. And many of the staff are suffering from stress-related anxiety, medical conditions because of it. And the shortage really poses an immediate risk to the public safety for all of us. So what we, AFGE, are doing about it, we have been actively negotiating our union contract since last summer, and we have been deliberate in educating and mobilizing the workforce around the contract each step of the way. We held bargaining town halls at each program office before the negotiations even started, and we solicited work group members to edit existing contract articles and draft new proposals to diversity, scientific integrity, field work and emergency response, manager accountability, all new proposals that we put on the table. I want to talk more about the contract, but let me just run through some of the other mobilization efforts that have been making a difference for us at the bargaining table. And I'm not saying it's been easy, but it is helping. Our mobilization committee, they initiate congressional sign-on letters regularly to solicit support from elected officials. The committee initiates petitions and surveys to staff, as needed to strengthen our position at the bargaining table, whatever it is, various issues. Bringing back a 5-tier rating system is one example. We leverage the press through a contract with Berlin Rosen. They handle all the details and they're able to get traction with different reporters and publications. That is money well spent. We're leveraging social media, Twitter, Facebook. Berlin Rosen manages a council website too. Circling back to the contract, everybody knows this is one of the best tools that we have to codify these legally binding protections for the EPA workforce. And also we're using this contract to create structures to pull off what I consider 3 miracles to make sure that EPA is operationally ready to tackle the climate crisis. Miracle number 1, retain the existing staff. Miracle number 2, we need to attract more staff and pay them as much as we can. And then miracle number 3 is to transfer this sacred institutional knowledge. So our negotiating team, they're very experienced, fierce, well organized, and we are making a pretty decent progress at the bargaining table. It doesn't always feel like it. We are nudging EPA closer to just building some fundamental pillars of operations success into everyday business practices through this contract. We have submitted proposals that carve out immediate pay raises for national experts, plus a pay grade correction plan for the other career fields to get those, salaries back up there where they should be. In short, we're asking the agency to pay EPA workers as much as we possibly can. Some of the other proposals include promoting staff in a fair and transparent manner. We've submitted provisions to revitalize and expand upward mobility. And we've also provided a comprehensive plan that includes pilot programs to increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility across the EPA. Locally in the Ann Arbor office, we, the union, have taken the lead on developing a succession plan. This is an initiative that was driven by concerns that was raised to the union by the EPA's workers during some recent union listening sessions that we held. And we have already started assessing the gaps and the vulnerabilities in critical career fields for the purpose of building redundancy into our core functions and transferring this sacred institutional knowledge and expertise in a deliberate manner. Variable number 3. So this local plan is informed by the frontline workers, and we believe it will advance EPA's operational readiness and increase our ability to protect the planet from a climate collapse. Persistence and unity is our superpower, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity, for the solidarity of all the AFL-CIO unions in our area that help our relatively small union leverage our influence to improve the lives of members in our community. Our planet is less and less habitable day by day, and my hope is that in partnership with you all, union supporters and union members, that we can together have a growing impact by networking and coalition building around climate change to ensure clean water and clean air and a healthier planet for our friends, family, and neighbors for generations to come. Thank you so much for your time today. It's truly an honor.
Thank you so much for participating in this panel. I would now like to ask State Representative Jimmy Wilson, who I think many members of this group know, to take the mic.
All right. Thanks, Eli. I'm Jimmy Wilson, a trustee on the executive board at UAW Local 898, hired in at Ford Motor Company at the Rossonville Components plant in 2012 and was elected trustee in 2014. Currently in my 3rd term now as a trustee on the executive board, still serving in that role today. On a more macro level of UAW, there's currently elections going on for the upper leadership of the International Union officers. In the past, each local union would elect delegates to send to the convention, which occurs every 4 years, to elect the upper leadership. But as of last year, the delegates voted to allow one member, one vote, which allows every union member to receive a ballot and elect the upper leadership. So by the end of February, all those results will be finalized, and then we'll move into the spring, where our local unions will have their local elections. And then after that, going into the summertime, the big 3, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, will start their negotiations with the UAW for contracts that are expiring in September. As you all know, back in 2019, GM went out on strike for 40 days. And all of you and a lot of our community partners came out, supported the workers that were on strike. So as we get closer to September, I'll keep you all informed on how negotiations are seeming like they're going. But I will say that just potentially be prepared if the 2-tier pay system is not closed at least a little more, be prepared to support us again in those efforts. On a more micro level, here in Washtenaw County, we have UAW Local 892 representing the Theresa facility in Saline. We have UAW Locals 1975 and 1976 representing parts of EMU. And then my local here in Ypsilanti, 898. Those are workers out of the Rossonville Components plant. We also still have multiple retiree chapters around the county, like Ian mentioned, that represent locals that may not be active anymore. As you all know, over the years, there were a lot of facilities here in Washtenaw County with a lot of workers living in the Ypsilanti area, but as facilities closed and workers moved away, retired, we've seen a lot of economic development drastically decreased in the Ypsilanti area and income levels as well. And my local 898 wasn't immune to this. In its inception back in 1957, there was almost 6,000 workers there. By the 80s and 90s, there were 4,000 workers, similar to that graphic that Ian showed you earlier. And then by no surprise, within about 10 years after the NAFTA agreement, we dropped in half again to about 2,000 workers. And throughout the 2000s, we're now down to about 600 members at Local 898. However, with the evolution of electric vehicles, Local 898 is starting to grow again because we're building hybrid batteries and all electric batteries. We still have other components like air induction systems, transmission oil pumps, but our new bread and butter are the batteries. And so we're hoping that we will be able to sustain ourselves and go into this new age of EV and electrification. I must say that Local 898 kind of stood out. Fort Rossonville, we stood out during the pandemic, and it was actually, quite frankly, right at the beginning of the pandemic, March of 2020, as you all know, we had shutdowns and we needed to stay home, stay safe. But within 2 weeks, there was a need for ventilators, and our facility was selected by Ford Motor Company to build ventilators, something unprecedented to really switch over into kind of the medical field during this crisis. But our skilled workers at the plant, as well as some of our partner contracting trades, within 1 month, we reframed, retooled, and we had a isolated medical production area within our facility, building ventilators that were shipped around the country to assist in this crisis. Within 4 months, we had built 50,000 ventilators to send out. I think during World War II, we were called the arsenal of democracy. And we kind of had to step up again during this crisis, during COVID-19, to kind of play that kind of role again to assist our country. I think we also had a couple other facilities, the Flat Rock, they were building, they were producing face masks, and then we had another facility building respirators. So Ford Motor Company once again had to step up and kind of take a leading role for the country. But the last part I want to touch on is kind of tied to another reason why we believe the so-called right to work law is not good for workers. Not only is it a drag on morale amongst workers, because knowing that you have freeloaders benefiting from the same contract in your facility, it's not good for morale in the facility. But also, a lot of our community service efforts actually come from our dues dollars. There's a portion of dues that we actually do a lot of community service work down through the years. So just at Local 898, we used to be able to do large adopt a child programs and Toys for Tots during the Christmas season. We had to scale that back in recent years because of our drop in membership. But our members have been so passionate about community service that a lot of us just end up kind of digging deeper into our pockets to still make that happen for the sake of so many children around Washtenaw County that are in need. We also donate a lot to the Fisher House and other veterans programs. We have our Build a Ramp program to build free ramps for disabled individuals. We give donations to the Corner Health and the Hope Clinic, United Way, NAACP, a lot of organizations around youth groups as well. So, just wanted to highlight how our dues dollars actually not just paying for maybe certain union members, some of our leadership's salaries, but it's actually a lot of it goes to our community service efforts in our community. So it's just another piece, another layer of why we really want to eliminate that right to work, or freeloading as we call it, right to freeload. Plus, it keeps morale, and it's just a fairness of everyone paying their fair share, and everyone having a voice at our membership meetings. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of UAW and Local 898. I know we're getting low on time, so I'll stop it there and just thank you all for allowing labor to have this part to play in the County Dems meeting this month. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Wilson. And I want to thank the whole panel for this very informative, really incredible presentation. And I also want to thank Ian Robinson, who was most responsible for putting this panel together, both for that and for his own presentation. I know we only have 5 minutes left. I think I'm going to take this a little bit over the noon mark. Of course, if you have to go, you have to go. And just to provide attendees with a chance for questions. I think we have time for 2 questions. If anyone wants to raise their hand. If not, I know that Theresa Reid wants to say a few words. And I will therefore, in the interest of time efficiency, which we all know is important, call on Theresa Reid. Theresa.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you so much. This Nancy Hine asked me said back at the beginning, there's strength in numbers. And of course, we all know that there's also strength in knowledge. And I've learned so much from you all today. And I'm really thankful for your work and for your time today. Ian said early on that we need to have more lines of communication between the WCDP and the unions. And I completely agree. And one of the things we've talked about is having a regular meeting of WCDP leadership and union leaders as well. And also a regular union piece in the newsletter. As I said early on, we're starting a process of strategic planning, and how the newsletter will look and what will be in the newsletter will be part of that process. And I certainly, I think we all agree that we need to hear more from the unions on a regular basis. So that's mostly what I have to say. I appreciate Ryan's correction. So it's Landmark Properties that is hiring the contractors that tolerate racist behavior. January 16th, 2:30 on the UM Diag for that action. And I think that's all I have. I'll probably, as soon as we sign off, I'll think of the other thing I needed to say. Mostly it's thank you. Thank you so much. And also to Ian and Loretta for your organizing. It's been really fantastic. Great program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, very much, Theresa. I'm just going to make one plug for our next program in the time remaining. This is being planned by Loretta Coddington and some help from Kathy Wyatt. Kathy White often helps us with our programs. Among the panelists next time will be Judge Erane Slay, Sheriff Jerry Clayton, and we hope Justice Kyra Harris Bolden, talking about achieving firsts in assuming responsible positions. And I think it's going to be an extremely interesting meeting. So I urge you to keep that on your calendars. Before I close up shop, is there anyone who'd like to have a final question or a final word they want to say? Especially Ian, since you played such a role in putting this together. Any closing thoughts, comments?
I'm sorry we didn't leave more time for question and answers. But I really thank you so much again for creating this opportunity to hear from the panel, which I think I'm just blown away by. I know all these folks and I know some of these stories, but hearing it all together is just quite amazing to see this cross section. And it's only a cross section. There are dozens of other leaders who could have been on this panel, and there's so much good work being done in our locals that I'm just really glad we got a chance to share some of that.
All right. Then I will thank you very much for participating, the panelists, for those who attended. Thank you also. And I hope to see you not sooner in a month. Take care. We're adjourned.